Gothina West clutched the microphone stand with sweaty palms beneath sweltering stage lights. She stood in what had been billed as the town's only modern performance space, really just a creaking old saloon with a makeshift wooden stage and a rigged PA system. Outside, a dilapidated sign still bore the name Dust Bowl Tavern, as if stubbornly refusing to acknowledge the changes time had wrought. In this dusty corner of the Old West that her ancestors had shaped and molded, there were no skyscrapers or neon signs, only wooden planks and old fences, a handful of ranchers with hard stares, and now, Gothina, a southern woman who dared to love punk rock in a place that barely tolerated newfangled country tunes. She had jet black hair pulled into pigtails and wore a short black dress with white stockings, a style that must have seemed like sorcery to some folks here. She gripped her guitar, an old gift purchased online, and cast a glance at the small crowd gathered. Most wore cowboy hats and bore suspicious, narrowed eyes. This was the moment she had waited for. She, Gothina West, wanted to be a rock star. She wanted to shred chords that electrified the human spirit, to scream lyrics that rattled dusty windows and shook souls awake. She'd spent months practicing. Her riffs combined ancient blues from her grandmother's dusty record player with the raw, rebellious energy of the tourist's MP3 player she'd received as a child. That single encounter, years ago, when a kind stranger passed through town and handed her a small device loaded with furious riffs and passionate screaming vocals, had planted the seed. If that had been possible, if a visitor from somewhere else could open her ears to a new world of sound, maybe she could open the ears of her neighbors here too. As her boot tapped the stage, the dusty air stirred. She began strumming, her voice slicing through the silence with a raw honesty, singing of dreams and fears, of leaving behind the stifling traditions of a place that refused to change. For a few seconds, she swore she saw wonder in the crowd's eyes. Then it happened. A man in a straw hat sneered, spat on the ground, and shouted, "Satan's music." Another cursed, "Get off that stage." The throng that had gathered began to murmur, growing louder. Disgust, outrage, fear. Her chords roared too loudly in their minds, too alien, too liberating. They considered it dangerous. A middle-aged woman shrieked, "The devil's come to tempt us." And in that moment, the crowd's fear turned to fury. Gothina flinched as a beer bottle shattered near her feet. She recoiled, tears in her eyes but still strumming. She would not be silenced. She screamed her lyrics over their insults. But fists were raised. Wood was splintered. The single stage spotlight winked out as chairs and tables flew. She could smell smoke. Fire caught on old curtains and rafters. She coughed, stumbling off the stage as someone lurched forward swinging a plank. Her guitar strap snagged on something, and she yanked free, leaving a piece of it behind. In moments, the entire venue was engulfed. Flames danced, illuminating the angry faces of the townsfolk who condemned her as a witch conjuring demons through song. Outside, under a starry sky, she wept. The old building's silhouette twisted into a monstrous shape of ash and ember. The cruelty, the misunderstanding, they stung more than any physical blow. Gothina looked up at a shooting star streaking across the endless black canvas. She clenched her fists. "I wish," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks, "that I could escape to someplace better. Someplace free. Someplace where my music doesn't bring anger and fear." She didn't know if anyone heard her, no one in town would care, but the universe seemed to. That night, as she drifted into a troubled sleep in her cramped little bedroom filled with posters of rock legends she had never met, Gothina sank into dreams that felt unusually heavy. Like weights on her chest, they pressed her down, deeper and deeper until she slipped through some invisible membrane between worlds. When she opened her eyes, she stood not in her bed but on a stage brighter and larger than any she'd imagined. Neon lights spelled her name, Gothina West. The crowd cheered wildly. She had made it. Her guitar hummed with supernatural resonance. And as she performed, the music was pure, her voice stronger than any PA system in reality could produce. They loved her here. This world, her dream world, adored her. There were no insults, no suspicious glares. She rocked out night after night, the audiences growing grander, their cheers more thunderous. She soared on the wings of applause, drifting in a haze of contentment. In this dream, she was finally a rock star. But after an indeterminate time, something changed. The world began to flicker. On some nights, the crowd's faces blurred, contorting into shadows with hollow eyes. The music itself twisted into dissonant shrieks. She would blink, and the stage would warp into a strange valley of nightmares, filled with grotesque shapes and monstrous silhouettes lurking behind velvet curtains. She realized with icy dread that she could not wake up. She was stuck here, in this dream world, unable to return to her real body. The once perfect dream had cracked, letting in rot and terror. Perhaps the price of escaping her old life, of running away from conflict, was to be imprisoned in her own nightmares. Her guitar felt heavier. She tried to wake herself, pinching her arm, slapping her cheeks, screaming into the void. Nothing worked. She wandered backstage corridors that never ended, stumbled into a labyrinth of shifting hallways. Within them, swirling whispers taunted her, whispering, "You can't run forever, Gothina." Every door she opened led to more confusion. Even the comforting recollection of her hometown's dusty streets, although oppressive, now seemed preferable to infinite nightmare corridors. Her fear of the unknown manifested as creatures of shadow with wicked grins and elongated limbs. They would skulk in corners, vanish when looked at directly, and sometimes lunge forward, scaring her nearly out of her mind. Yet Gothina had one advantage here, the power of a lucid dreamer. Years ago, she had experimented with lucid dreaming, small things, like changing the color of a flower, or hovering a few inches off the ground. Now, this skill blossomed. With concentration, she could reshape the dream. She tried to create a safe haven, a personal sanctuary of neon guitars and well-tuned amplifiers, but the nightmares kept creeping in. She needed a bigger solution. If this was a dream world, perhaps there was a higher plane, a metaphysical junction where the barrier between dream and reality thinned. She recalled stories, old philosophers, traveling mystics who'd spoken of a metaphysical space connecting all minds, a collective unconscious. If she found that place, maybe she could return home or at least learn how to escape. She closed her eyes, strumming imaginary chords on her phantom guitar. She focused not on the physical strings, but on what she had once read in a strange flyer that had come with that MP3 player. It mentioned that all music, all consciousness, might be connected by invisible lines, chords of consciousness. But here, in her twisted dream, she envisioned them as chords of consciousness, like the grandest cosmic melody that held together minds and realities. The neural patterns that formed thoughts might be transmuted into metaphysical harmonies. Here, in this lucid state, she reached out not with her fingers, but with her essence, plucking at invisible strings that hummed in a dark void. The air around her shimmered, warping into a swirling tunnel of starry brilliance. She had found it, the collective unconscious. It was a kaleidoscopic expanse filled with glowing filaments, chords, that represented countless minds. Each chord sang a different note, contributing to an infinite cosmic symphony. She drifted through this space, marveling at how each consciousness was a junction, a set of chords interwoven into a grand metaphysical net. Reality and dream were just two harmonics of the same grand instrument. By navigating these chords of consciousness, maybe she could find a gateway back to her sleeping body. She soared through a shimmering field of chord-like streams, each string vibrating with memories, ideas, dreams, and nightmares. She realized these chords were everywhere, timeless, dimensionless, and unique. They transcended physical space. Her hometown's neural patterns, her own guitar riffs, the hateful murmurs of the townsfolk, the kind tourist's compassionate smile, everything was a chord in this metaphysical opus. By understanding these chords, she might rewrite the melody of her life. As she ventured deeper, a massive gate appeared before her. It looked like a colossal set of organ pipes carved from crystal. The gate of dream and reality. It hovered in a swirling nebula of ideas and memories. On the other side, she sensed the familiar texture of the real world. She longed to leap through it, to return to her bed and wake up with renewed purpose. But guarding the gate was a manifestation of darkness, a figure identical to herself, dressed in inverted colors, white hair and pigtails, a long white dress with black stockings, a twisted mockery of her style. This manifestation stood with arms crossed, smirking. "Gothina," the manifestation cooed, "you think you can just leave? After all your cowardice, you're running from the truth?" Its voice was her own, but dripping with scorn. Gothina clenched her jaw. This was something born of her fears, her insecurities. A metaphysical reflection of all that she hated in herself. "Get out of my way," she demanded. The manifestation only laughed. "Oh, my dear dreamer. If you want to escape, why not escape for good? End it all." It gestured beyond the gate to a yawning abyss of forgotten memories. The pit seemed to sing a siren song, leap, and never worry about fear or failure again. Gothina's stomach twisted. She had never seriously considered such a thing. Yet here, in this endless nightmare, the temptation to escape permanently, to vanish into the dark melody of oblivion, tickled her mind. The manifestation's eyes gleamed. Why return to a world that burns your venues and ridicules your music? Why struggle? Why not take the ultimate escape, death? Gothina gripped her dream guitar tightly. Her strings hummed, producing soft notes of defiance. "I don't want to die," she said, but her voice shook. She remembered the flames licking at the saloon's rafters, the townsfolk's hatred. Returning would mean facing that fear again, facing the unknown world outside her hometown, a place she'd never dared to go. The manifestation closed in, its aura bristling with dark power. Gothina could sense it wielded the same lucid abilities she had. This was a mirror match, a battle of equals. "Come on then," the dark version taunted. "Show me the strength of your convictions. Or admit you have none." They clashed in a furious exchange of dream-forged blows. Gothina summoned her guitar as a flaming axe of sound energy. "Riff Razor," she cried, swinging it at her foe. The manifestation countered effortlessly with a bassline shield, deep reverberation shield. Waves of low-frequency hums dispersing Gothina's attack. Their combat was like a shonen battle of epic proportions, each hurling sonic constructs through the astral realm. Gothina tried Cacophony Cannon, unleashing a beam of shrieking guitar solos. The manifestation answered with Dissonance Divide, splitting the attack and sending shards of sonic knives back at Gothina. Each blow made Gothina reel. She was equal in power to this dark self. They knew each other's moves, each other's fears. Where Gothina tried to muster courage, the manifestation targeted her doubts. "You think a new city will love you? They'll mock you too. The world is cruel everywhere. Why not end it now?" Gothina grit her teeth. She tried to ignore the taunts, but they sank in deep. Her dreams had become nightmares. Would reality be any kinder? She began to waver, her resolve flickering. The manifestation saw this and pressed its advantage, conjuring a swirling vortex of negative energy. "Punk's End Elegy." It howled, launching a wave of shrieking notes that tore through the metaphysical chords around them. Gothina cried out as the attack slammed into her. The chords of the collective unconscious around her trembled. She fell to her knees, breath heaving. The gate loomed behind her, but she was no closer to passing through it. She clutched her guitar, her knuckles white. The manifestation's words replayed in her mind. Maybe it was right. Maybe all of this was pointless. Maybe the safer route was to leap into that abyss of forgotten memories and be done with it. She closed her eyes, tears burning. She was tired of running. Tired of the scorn. Tired of trying to defend herself. In that darkness behind her closed eyelids, images flickered, her hometown's dusty main street at sunset, turning the wooden facades a gentle gold. She remembered sitting on a broken fence with her grandmother, listening to old country ballads and sipping sweet tea. She remembered the kind tourist who introduced her to punk rock. That stranger hadn't laughed at her dreams, he'd encouraged them. She recalled practicing guitar alone in her tiny room, the exhilaration when she finally nailed a challenging riff. She remembered laughing with her friend Marlene at a secret listening party they once held in the old barn. They weren't all bad memories. Life wasn't a string of disappointments. For every hateful glare, there had been a kind smile. For every failed show, there could be another attempt. Was she really going to let a single riot define her future? If she was bold enough to try punk rock in a conservative town, if she was brave enough to master lucid dreaming and traverse metaphysical realms, why could she not face the unknown world beyond her hometown's borders? She felt something stir deep within her. These chords of consciousness, she understood them now. Each chord represented a memory, an idea, a dream. If the manifestation was her fear given form, then she could combat fear with hope. She let her mind roam the collective unconscious, searching for a chord that resonated with bravery and new beginnings. She found it shimmering in the metaphysical darkness, a purple-hued strand thrumming with power. She reached out and strummed it with her soul. A melodic hum filled the void. This was the chord of hope, the chord of her future. She drew it into herself. Purple energy crackled around her, forming an aura that danced like stage lights at a sold-out concert. The manifestation snarled, perplexed. Gothina stood, tears gone, replaced by determined resolve. "I won't run," she said quietly, voice steady. "I'll find a new place. I'll share my music with people who understand. And I'll keep living, no matter how hard it gets." The manifestation hissed, "So you've chosen suffering." Gothina's aura flared brighter. "No," she said, "I've chosen life. And I've chosen to face my fears." She raised her guitar high. "Behold the new technique that transcends nightmares. Purple Aria Blade." With that cry, she channeled the swirling purple energy into her instrument. The guitar's neck elongated into a blade of shimmering light. She swung it in a grand arc. They clashed again, but this time Gothina's strikes rang with conviction. The manifestation tried to counter with its old moves, but each chord Gothina struck was infused with her newfound courage. The music thundered with a harmony of memory and hope, drowning out the manifestation's hateful whispers. With each strike, the dark figure faltered, cracks spreading across its pale facade. Gothina leapt, her hair whipping like raven wings. "This world's got no place for your poison," she declared. Arpeggio of ascendance. She unleashed a flurry of notes, each a purple blade of sound cutting through the air. The manifestation howled as the attacks pierced it, scattering its essence into drifting motes of darkness. Finally, Gothina raised her blade guitar overhead and brought it down in one decisive stroke. Final encore, crescendo cut. The manifestation vanished in a burst of silence. The darkness, its hateful words, all faded like dissipating smoke. The gate of dream and reality now glowed with welcoming light, and Gothina stepped forward, breathing heavily, heart pounding. She touched the gate's surface. It hummed with the chords of consciousness, the infinite tapestry of minds. She understood now, consciousness wasn't a closed loop. It was a melody that could be rearranged, harmonized, and rediscovered in other places and times. Memories could be learned from and manipulated, not to deceive oneself, but to inspire courage. With a gentle push, she stepped through the gate. There was a sensation of weightlessness, a rush of wind, and then she gasped awake in her cramped bedroom. Her posters still hung on peeling wallpaper. The moonlight filtered through a dusty window. She sat up, heart still hammering. The world seemed smaller now, but also full of possibilities. She wasn't trapped here. She didn't have to remain in a place that refused to let her grow. She could move on. She could journey elsewhere, find a bigger stage, a more open-minded audience. Life was worth living, worth exploring. The unknown wasn't just a void to be feared, it was a vast stage waiting for her performance. She got dressed, more casually now, just jeans, a jacket, her guitar slung over her shoulder. She took one last look around her old house. She packed a bag with essentials, clothes, a bit of money, and that old MP3 player the tourist had given her as a child. The music on it was still there, a reminder of how new experiences could open worlds. If as a child she embraced an unfamiliar genre and fell in love with it, why not embrace new places, new audiences, new challenges now as an adult? Outside, her hometown slept soundly under the stars. The remains of the burned venue were charred silhouettes at the end of the street. Gothina approached them quietly, noticing that the ash smelled of old regrets. She knelt and pressed a hand to the scorched earth. She felt no hatred for these people, only sadness. They were trapped in their fears. Perhaps, in time, they would change, or perhaps not. Either way, she no longer had to accept the world as it was. She could find a better one. She stood up, inhaling the cool night air. A distant train whistle echoed. The big city was far away, hours by train. She would go there, see if her music could find fertile ground, where a guitarist with pigtails and punk rock dreams could bloom. She set off down the dusty road, the stars overhead guiding her like stage lights in the cosmic auditorium of the collective unconscious. As she walked, she felt a subtle hum at the edge of her perception. The chords of consciousness were still with her, an underlying resonance beneath reality. She considered how, in the dream realm, these chords represented neural patterns and metaphysical sensations, bridging physical activity in the brain with the intangible realms of thought and memory. She wondered if she could tap into them again someday, if memories and ideas could truly be installed, manipulated, or learned from like musical arrangements. Her showdown with her manifestation had taught her that the greatest obstacles were internal. She had wanted to escape reality, but reality was just a stage where her performance had yet to reach its crescendo. She would do better now, forging ahead. She might face more hardships, and not everyone in the city might embrace her style, but at least there she could find kindred spirits, open-minded souls, and maybe even other musicians with whom to collaborate. She would form a band, make friends who understood her lyrics, and maybe find an audience that would cheer her on instead of throwing bottles. The train station, just a rickety platform and a ticket booth, emerged from the darkness. She bought a ticket with trembling fingers. There was no going back now. The train's engine light glowed like a beacon of hope. She boarded, found a seat by a window, and watched her hometown shrink into the distance. Her heart fluttered with nervous excitement. She imagined future gigs in clubs where neon lights shimmered. She imagined mixing her southern twang with searing punk riffs to create a unique sound that only she could bring into being. As the train rattled along, she revisited thoughts of the collective unconscious. It was a place she had only briefly encountered, but its majesty lingered. Within that realm, individual consciousness was a collection of chords, each chord representing some aspect of self, memory, or dream. Consciousness was a virtual junction in a metaphysical net. She wondered, if she had the power to shape her dreams, could she one day return there to learn new riffs from the infinite tapestry of minds? Could she install new patterns of creativity by plucking cosmic strings of consciousness? She smiled at the thought. The possibilities were endless. Her eyelids grew heavy again, lulled by the rhythmic clacking of the tracks. She allowed herself a moment of rest. She would need energy for the city. Maybe, in a dreamless sleep this time, she could simply gather strength. She had decided to live, to face life's challenges, and not to let fear or nightmares force her into some final, tragic escape. The sun rose, painting the horizon pink and gold, and Gothina woke to the gentle stopping of the train at a larger station. She stepped onto the platform, breathing in the new air, fresher, somehow, tinged with distant spices and engine fumes, the scent of a bigger world. This place was so different from her hometown, more diverse faces, people wearing clothes from across the globe, musicians tuning instruments on street corners. She felt excitement coil in her belly. Yet as she ventured into these unknown streets, her mind occasionally drifted back to that metaphysical battleground. She could still see the face of that dark manifestation, hear it mocking her. She had emerged victorious, changed forever. She had grown. Perhaps, in a way, the old Gothina had died back there, in the dream world's final confrontation. Now she was a new version of herself, more resilient and willing to embrace the unknown. As she walked, she spotted a flyer tacked to a telephone pole, "Open mic night, all genres welcome." A thrill shot through her. She ran her hand over the guitar case slung over her shoulder. She had a second chance. A new stage. This time, she might find receptive ears. This time, she would play not from a place of fear or desperation, but from a place of authenticity and courage. Her songs would carry echoes of that metaphysical journey, that battle of chords of consciousness, that glimpse into the dimensionless metaphysical space tying all minds together. Her music would be richer now, her lyrics wiser, and her stage presence unshakable. As she considered what to play at the open mic, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. She had overcome something truly dark, her own worst thoughts. She had earned this fresh start. The city beckoned, and so did the future. The final show in the dream realm wouldn't be her last grand performance. It was just the closing act of one cosmic concert in a series of infinite gigs stretching across time and possibility. There was more to learn, about the metaphysics of consciousness, about turning memories into living melodies, and about how dream and reality intertwined. Maybe one day she'd meet others who understood these mysteries. Maybe they would form a band that played not just for human audiences, but for the entire cosmos of minds. Perhaps in a future adventure, she might return to the collective unconscious intentionally, forging alliances with dream spirits, or even encountering new nightmares made stronger by old fears she hadn't yet faced. And what about before all this had happened, before the night of the riot, before she discovered she could truly shape her dreams? She suspected that these events were part of a longer tale, that her awakening as a lucid dreamer had roots in some past encounter she barely remembered. Perhaps that kind tourist had been more than just a wanderer. Maybe he had known something about these metaphysical chords, about the nature of consciousness. If she ever found him again in her travels, maybe he could shed light on what set her on this path in the first place. Gothina West smiled, stepping confidently down the sidewalk as morning traffic hummed by. The story that led her here still felt unfinished, as if chapters from before had shaped her destiny, and chapters ahead lay unwritten. The dark manifestation's final words, although hateful, had pushed her to find resolve. The world was big, life was worth living, and she could still become what she wanted to be. She had survived the riot, the nightmares, and the temptation to end it all. She had embraced the unknown and emerged stronger. At that thought, a subtle breeze brushed her cheek, whispering like the faintest guitar string being plucked in the distance, a reminder of the chords of consciousness that bound all experiences together. She knew now that nothing was ever truly lost. Even in the darkest moments, there was music to be made, melodies to be discovered in the fabric of existence. She was ready for whatever encore awaited her in this grand, unending concert of life. And somewhere, far beyond her current understanding, beyond the city's tallest towers and the farthest stars, the collective unconscious stirred. New chords formed. New dreams shimmered. New manifestations coalesced. There would be more battles, more songs, more mysteries to unravel. Gothina West, guitar in hand, walked forward, heart brimming with hope and purpose, and destiny watched on, curious to see what tune she would play next.